Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Saj. We're going to begin this morning with the dire warnings from international organizations over the worsening conditions inside Gaza. The United Nations says Gazans are facing, quote, an immediate possibility of starvation.
The World Food Program says only 10% of the necessary food supplies needed in the region have entered through the Rafah border since the war began. Food production in northern Gaza has come to a halt because of the lack of fuel. That shortage has also created a total communications blackout, which is slowing down aid deliveries. It's making it hard to communicate where deliveries should be made and when. This all comes as Israeli forces continue to carry out their targeted operation against Al-Shifa Hospital. Officials say they've recovered the bodies of 2 hostages near the hospital, 19-year-old Noah Marciano and 65-year-old Yehudit Weiss. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin joins us now from Tel Aviv with the latest. Aaron, good morning. Let's start right there with those 2 hostages recovered by Israeli forces. How were they located? Where were they found? And how does this impact negotiations for the release of the remaining hostages?
Well, Joe, overnight, the Israeli military announced that it had recovered the body of 19-year-old Corporal Noah Marciano. They had confirmed her death earlier in the week, originally announced by Hamas. They're saying they recovered her body from a building near the Al-Shifa hospital complex. Her remains have been brought to Israel and returned to her family. Now, it's unclear if her body was found in the same building as 64-year-old Yehudit Weiss. Yehudit Weiss is an Israeli hostage. She was kidnapped on October 7th from kibbutz Be'eri when Hamas militants stormed her kibbutz, killing her husband and kidnapping her. She'd just been diagnosed with breast cancer and was due to receive radiation treatment. Then this week, the Israeli military confirming that her remains had been recovered in a building near the Al-Shifa hospital complex, along with weapons, RPGs, as well as guns. Now, news of their deaths are likely to place even more pressure on these ongoing hostage negotiations. They've been going on for weeks now, with the president of the United States saying he's mildly optimistic about the outcome of those negotiations. Joe.
Aaron, meanwhile, the UN human rights chief called on Israel to grant his team access to Gaza to investigate these competing claims about the Al-Shifa hospital yesterday. Let's listen to a little bit of what he said about the deaths at Gaza's largest hospital.
Never in my career, working in many crisis situations around the world, have I met such an outpouring of fear, anger, and despair. The killing of so many civilians cannot be dismissed as collateral damage, not in a kibbutz, not in a refugee camp, and not in a hospital.
So this comes after Israel released a photo alleging they found an operational tunnel shaft at Al-Shifa. What more are we learning about the situation at the hospital this morning? Are Israeli forces close to ending what they're calling this targeted operation on Al-Shifa?
Well, it's unclear. It's difficult to paint a picture of exactly what's happening at the hospital complex, given this network-wide mobile phone outage striking the Gaza Strip after the main mobile phone provider, network provider there in Gaza, said that it has a fuel shortage. It ran out of fuel to power its backup generators. It's very difficult to reach anyone that we've been in contact with inside the Al-Shifa complex. What we know is that the Israeli military says they raided the complex for a second day yesterday, uncovering that tunnel shaft as well as a vehicle full of weapons. On Wednesday, I had spoken with the head of the hospital's burn unit. He painted just this desperate and dire humanitarian situation. He described his 600 patients were dying at a much higher rate. They lacked food, water, electricity, as well as oxygen. And it's unclear when the hospital is going to be evacuated. The WHO this morning releasing a statement saying the WHO and partners are exploring the possibility of evacuation of patients, health workers, and IDPs besieged at Al-Shifa Hospital. Safe passage and fuel for the Palestinian Red Crescent ambulances are needed to ensure the evacuation can be carried out. And it seems as though the Israeli military is continuing to try and build its case that there is a Hamas terror cell located underneath the hospital. But it seems that they have found no smoking gun just yet, guys.
All right. Aaron McLaughlin in Tel Aviv. Aaron, thank you.
Thank you. Well, the U.S. is facing a growing call to support a ceasefire in Gaza as officials continue to negotiate extended humanitarian pauses. Secretary Antony Blinken sat down with nightly news anchor Lester Holt to discuss the ongoing bombardments and the latest from the Al-Shifa hospital.
Secretary Blinken, if I can ask you about the war in
please.
Gaza. Israel is showing video of weapons, it says, were recovered at the Al-Shifa hospital, video of what may be a tunnel, but it's clear that the evidence doesn't necessarily point to a Hamas command and control center, as Israel and the U.S. have maintained. What's happening there?
Two things. One, exactly why there should be assault rifles located next to an MRI machine escapes me. And this is compelling evidence of the fact that Hamas embeds itself in civilian infrastructure of one kind or another. We have our own information that command and control nodes are located either in or under hospitals. There's several of them. And this is something that's really monstrous in what Hamas has done to try to embed itself among civilians.
But based on what you've seen, does it warrant the bombardment that we've seen, the level of bombardment against the hospitals?
Well, these are what's going on now are ground operations, not bombardments. And as I've said before, we have seen far too many Palestinian civilians killed. And we have been urging Israel all along to do everything possible to minimize civilian casualties. They've opened up corridors so that people can get out of harm's way. They've been bringing supplies into the hospitals as they've tried very deliberately to clear them of any Hamas fighters. And all of this is incredibly hard.
What is your level of confidence that we could see more hostages released soon?
We're working this intensively, and we have been for weeks. I remain hopeful, but the less said, the better.
Secretary Blinken, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
And our thanks to Lester Holt for that interview.
Now to the economic toll that the Israel-Hamas war is taking on the region. In Israel, there's been a shift in how many young workers are available as the nation rapidly mobilizes its military. That is leading credit rating agency S&P to predict that the country's economy will shrink 5% in the last quarter of this year. NBC's Josh Letterman shows us how those economic woes will be felt both in Israel and in Gaza.
It takes about 100 workers to sow the fields and harvest the crops at Chavivian Organic Farm in southern Israel. On October 7th, the day Hamas attacked, much of the workforce disappeared.
First to leave were, of course, the Palestinian workers and the workers from Gaza. They just vanished one day. They're not here.
Then foreign workers from Asia and Africa. Some of them stayed, but many went home after Hamas killed dozens of Thai workers on October 7th and took others hostage. These days, when Michal wakes up, she doesn't know how many workers will show up that day. Many farms are now relying largely on volunteers.
Are there farms here in Israel that may go out of business because of this war?
Many farms.
Here in the fields just 10 miles from Gaza, as these workers are working the crops, rockets coming from the Gaza Strip being intercepted by the Iron Dome. This is what it's like right now to be working in Israel's economy in the middle of war.
Since the war started, Israel has called up more than 350,000 reservists and evacuated hundreds of thousands of others from homes near Gaza and Lebanon. Together, that's 18% of the workforce off the job, Israel's Labor Department says. Still, the economic blow pales in comparison to Gaza, where the UN says 6 in 10 jobs have been lost during the war, and at least 45% of homes damaged, adding to an already sky-high poverty rate. In Israel, the military call-up has emptied young, educated workers out of Israel's famed tech sector, says Don Ben-David, an economist at Tel Aviv University.
Israel is highly dependent on high tech. It's only about 10% of the workforce, but that 10% accounts for half of our exports.
Are there comparisons between Israel's wartime economy and what we saw during COVID?
Oh, yeah. The fact that missiles are raining down all over the place means that you don't really venture out if you don't have to.
In other words, people are spending less. Israel's Statistics Bureau says half of businesses have lost at least 50% of their income. At this restaurant in the commuter town of Modi'in, it is far from business as usual. It's a very somber atmosphere, she says. Customers come in, head down. No one smiles. People are sad, worried. Naama's cafe closed after the terror attacks for nearly a month and only recently reopened. But it's been a struggle. Staff are in short supply, ingredients are hard to come by, and so are the customers. We went through a tough experience, she says. If this war continues, I don't know how much longer our business will survive.
Israel's central bank says this war is costing more than $500 million per week, which in a country this size is a massive amount. But the real question now is, how much longer will this war last?
Josh Letterman, thank you so much for that report.
Well, not in California, where the man who attacked Paul Pelosi is awaiting his sentencing. Yesterday, a federal jury delivered a unanimous verdict finding David DePape guilty on federal assault and attempted kidnapping charges. It came at the end of a 4-day trial. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson is in San Francisco with the details.
What's going on, man?
A guilty verdict for the man accused of breaking into the home of Nancy Pelosi and assaulting her husband with a hammer.
What is going on right now?
After just 8 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found David DePape guilty on both federal charges.
What this guilty verdict on all counts sends is a clear message that regardless of what your beliefs are, what you cannot do is physically attack a member of Congress or their immediate family.
During the trial, prosecutors painted DePape as a man warped by conspiracy theories like QAnon and Pizzagate. His public defender agreed, but argued he was not guilty because the attack was wholly unrelated to Nancy Pelosi's official duties. When 83-year-old Paul Pelosi took the stand, he recounted the horror of last October's home invasion, saying after the attack, he remembers waking up in a pool of blood. In a shocking move, the defense countered by calling DePape to the stand, arguing he's a man so radicalized by disinformation. DePape says the Pelosi home was just one stop on a long hit list, and attacking Pelosi was a desperate act as police arrived, adding Paul was never a target. But the federal jury disagreed, and DePape, who is a Canadian citizen, faces up to 50 years behind bars.
DePape also faces state charges, including attempted murder, burglary, and false imprisonment. Proceedings for that case expected to be underway at the end of the month.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. The special counsel appointed to investigate President Joe Biden's handling of classified documents has interviewed his son, Hunter Biden, according to a source familiar with the matter. The investigation is looking at how President Biden ended up with classified documents in his Wilmington, Delaware home. Hunter Biden listed that address on his driver's license at the time the documents were stored there. The special prosecutor is expected to deliver a report with his findings at the conclusion of his investigation, which is now in its 11th month. Spokespeople for both the Justice Department and the White House have declined requests for comments.
Well, embattled New York Congressman George Santos says he won't seek re-election next year after the release of a damning report by the House Ethics Committee.
The report concluded that there were, quote, substantial evidence that Santos violated federal criminal laws, including the use of campaign funds for personal expenses.
NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us on this now. Hey, Julie, good morning. So this was the scathing report by the Ethics Committee. Tell us more about the findings in this and what they say Santos was spending campaign money on.
Yeah, hey, good morning, guys. Well, the Ethics Committee certainly brought receipts. They allege that Santos spent thousands of dollars on designer goods. That includes $6,000 at Ferragamo, more at Hermes. He spent money on Botox, on OnlyFans, at Sephora. Essentially, they said that he, quote, exploited the House candidacy for personal profit at nearly every turn. He even moved hundreds of thousands of dollars from a consulting firm that he actually was affiliated with to his personal bank accounts. Now, all of that said, the ethics panel is all but recommending that Santos be expelled from Congress. The reason they didn't include that in the report, the chair of the ethics panel, Michael Guest, told us was because it would take months, additional months before the report could be released. But really just in this scathing 56-page report, the committee had found that Santos essentially profited on his House candidacy and discredited the House as an institution.
So, Julie, how is Santos reacting to the report? And looking ahead, could we now see this renewed effort to expel him from the House, perhaps very quickly?
Certainly. You already see dual efforts. There's one that could be introduced this morning by the chairman of the ethics panel. For Santos's part, he really is doing an about-face here. He said yesterday after the release of this report that he would actually not be seeking re-election. That's certainly a change from what we've been hearing from him even after he was indicted last month. He still said he planned on staying in this seat, running for it once again in this competitive district. Now his colleagues might kick him out of Congress regardless of that fact. There is frustration, there is anger, certainly not only from his New York Republican colleagues, but even Speaker Johnson's office releasing a statement yesterday, all but allowing members to vote as they please. When you'll just remember 2 weeks ago, you had the initial vote to expel Santos. A lot of members voted against that, in part because they wanted him to have his due process. Now, since the release of this report, we've already seen dozens of members, Democrats and Republicans, say they will vote to expel Santos. The question is when, not if.
Julie, we know you'll stay on this for us. Obviously, there's a lot to continue to unpack there. But quickly, I do want to switch gears to the fact that the president signed that stopgap funding bill yesterday. It officially averted a government shutdown. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well ahead of the deadline tonight, guys. When have we seen this happen in Congress in the past few years? Look, this will set up certainly a fight when Congress is back after the Thanksgiving break. They have a lot to pass, including aid for Ukraine, Israel, the border, the Indo-Pacific region as well. But also, when you look at how this measure was staggered, they'll have two funding cliffs, meaning one in mid-January when they run out of, some agencies run out of money, another one February 2nd when those agencies run out of money. So essentially, Congress is just punching the can down the road. They're really just saving the hardest assignment for later. So we're certainly going to see more of these spending fights in the future. Unfortunately, to our audience, who I'm sure is getting tired of this conversation, and many Americans who certainly don't want to be toyed with.
All right, Julie Sirkin, as always, thank you.
From coast to coast, some soggy weather could rain on your parade this weekend. So let's get a closer look at your morning news now forecast.
That's right. Michelle Grossman is with us this Friday. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Happy Friday. And yeah, we have some soggy spots on this Friday. And we're going to have some soggy spots into Thanksgiving week that could impact some travel. So first, we're looking at radar, and we're seeing some rain falling throughout the Ohio Valley. It's a cold front that is stretching from the Great Lakes all the way down to the lower Mississippi Valley. So along that front, we're going to see some rain. We're going to see some wind as well. It's going to drop some temperatures. So that's for the Ohio Valley into the interior parts of the Northeast, also the Tennessee Valley, lower Mississippi Valley. And then back to the west, we're watching a powerful storm system. It's the atmospheric river that continues to move on shore, and we're going to see some rain, some mountain snow in the west, not only today but also tomorrow. Then that storm system is going to make its way across country, and that's going to impact our Thanksgiving week. But first, unsettled East Coast, you notice two things on this map. We have that cold front, that's the blue line, and that area of low pressure. The cold front is going to sweep the area of low pressure out. That's good news. That's what brought all the rain to Florida. We're still seeing some lingering showers in the northern part of Florida, the eastern part of Florida, but that's going to dissipate throughout the day as that cold front pushes it out. We're also seeing some lingering showers along the Carolina coast, but it's really this cold front that's going to bring the wet weather into parts of the interior Northeast, and it's going to change the weather in the mid-Atlantic states, the Northeast, by tomorrow. We're warm today, and then we're going to be seeing temperatures drop throughout the day tomorrow. The winds are going to pick up, and then we're really chilly on Sunday. So this is Saturday. Notice that most of that cold front is off the coast at the later Saturday, but we're going to see some lingering showers, some higher mountain snow in portions of Maine on Saturday. It's going to be windy, too. Temperatures are going to drop, so we're not talking about a whole lot of rain, but still could see an inch in some spots. You noticed on radar earlier, we saw some brighter colors, and that's indicating where that heavier rain is falling. So airport impacts for today. I know some people are lucky enough to be making their Thanksgiving travel now. We're going to see some possible impacts in Cleveland, Cincinnati, Nashville, the West Coast. We're going to see it in San Francisco, Las Vegas, and also Los Angeles. And that's because we're watching that area of low pressure in the West Coast. It's a big one, and it's bringing big impacts, especially along the coast and also the mountains of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So showers continue to rotate into California. That will be the case as we go throughout tomorrow as well, guys. We're going to see some wet weather in the Pacific Northwest, and then we're going to watch this move across the country next week, and that's going to cause some problems in terms of travel. So we'll talk more about that next hour. Back to you.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a lot about it next week, too. All right, Michelle.
Hopefully not too much of a problem. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.